Hello, Chill Computer Guy. Today we're here in Reason 10. That's right, Reason 10. This is the Reason 10 beta, and I'm doing the Reason 10 challenge. I have to go out of town tomorrow, so I didn't have a whole lot of time to work on this. I've been working all week, but what I did is I kind of put something together. I wasn't sure kind of where to start, you know. And so what I did is I started with a kind of a psytrance bass line and just kind of built around it. But what I tried to do is I tried to use an instance of all the new instruments and whatnot. Let's go ahead and take a look at the rack here. As you can see, we got the Clang, we got the Pangea, we got the Humana. Over here we have Europa. I got 3 Europas in here. I got 1, 2, 3, 4 grains in here. And then I got the Radical Piano right here. And I also got Synchronous in here. So yeah, I tried to use an instance of each of the new instruments. And yeah, I think things turned out pretty well. I would have liked to have more time to maybe do, normally with the vocal bus, I usually parallel that and put some more processes in there. But usually when I do that, I bounce everything down to audio, because if I start to parallel my vocal chain, my computer kind of chokes a little bit, because if you have everything in, in MIDI data, then you're putting a lot of strain on your CPU. Let's go ahead and look at the sequencer here. We'll go ahead and unfold this. Unfold the sequencer, make it all huge. We have this maxed out, that way we can kind of see what's going on. Anyway, we had the bass. We start out with the bass. We got basically a psytrance bass line. The thing about a psytrance bass line is you can put a 4/4 kick drum on there, and then basically all the new synthesizers, all the new sounds in Reason 10, I figured I would kind of like have them kind of solo on top of the 4/4 and the psytrance bass line. Kind of like a nice little fertile ground to kind of grow some... Now this song just kind of goes on a tangent. It doesn't really loop back or anything. It's just kind of like, each instrument kind of comes in and out and whatnot. And that's just kind of what's going on. We got a, filter cut off, of course. And then the bass synth is the Legend. The Legend by Synapse Audio is my favorite bass synth for a reason. Absolutely love this synth. It's kind of misbehaving right now. And we have our drums. Now, normally with the drum track, I explode it. That way we put, we got the kick and the snare, and then we have hi-hats and shakers and whatnot, all on separate tracks. That way you can kind of pull them in and out. You kind of thin out the drum line and then kind of fill it up during certain parts of the song. That's something that I've just been doing for years, and I just love the idea that I love how Reason works as far as being able to put multiple tracks on one instrument. That's a huge thing that I love about Reason. There's a very high point about Reason, that a lot of DAWs don't allow you to put multiple tracks on each instrument. And so with Reason you can do that, and then you can just kind of, mute your stuff or pull it, delete it, or do whatever you need to do. And then comes the new instruments. We have the Kalimba, which is the Clang. We have an arpeggiator hooked up to that thing. And then we have the Venus, which is the new Humana instrument. Great sounding instrument. We have the new Clang, I think it's called the Clang and whatnot. A little 808. Then we got some Europas here. We have a pluck for Europa. And then a pad there. We have a bunch of these Noxious, So we have a couple of the grain synthesizers, some bells. Oh, that's good. That's really, really good. The new the Radical Piano, which is an old instrument, but we got that hooked up to a delay via the SYN channels. We have another Europa here. That right there that's a loud Europa right there. We have.
You hear that bass, man?
Oh.
You hear that bass? You hear that bass, man?
Get down, y'all! Get down, y'all! Get down, y'all!
Gotta have some samples in there. We have a C670 for automation. That's one of my favorite compressors for a reason. We have a nice uplift, and then these are just some audio tracks down here. So yeah, that's pretty much the sequencer. And if we zoom way out, we can see there's a lot of stuff just kind of coming in and out and whatnot. But that takes care of the sequencer right there. Let me go ahead and fold that back up. Always good to keep organized. As far as the rack, I've been using these. They're little rack dividers. I believe. I don't know who makes these. Who makes these things? The Selig Audio. These little rack dividers. I love these things. I think they're free. But yeah, I really like them. Dividing up the rack, keeping organized. I just have always really liked these rack dividers. The only thing is when you collapse the rack, those also collapse, which is kind of a deal. But what are you gonna do? And so that way I can kind of see what's going on here. I have my bass, which is just a single instrument, the Legend by Synapse Audio, my favorite bass synth, if I didn't mention that already. And then we have the drums, of course, divided up into 4 different tracks, an auxiliary, hat, snares, and kick drum. We have a drum bus, and normally I'll probably have more than just the 4 tracks, but this song I just I kind of put it together real quick. Then we have, of course, the Kong, which I don't know. I love the fact that you can I really love the fact that you can put your drum line together, and when you're listening to it, put like a rattler, put a transient shaper on there. If the drums aren't sitting right, you have a transient shaper right there in a drop-down menu. Like, that's super convenient, the fact that you have a transient shaper just right there in the drums. I mean, you can drag one in most DAWs. It's just nice to have it right there. And then we have the cling, of course. The Pangea. The Humana. And the thing is with these 3 instruments here is, say what you want about, like, they're technically kind of sample libraries or whatever, but they're really, really good sounding instruments. There's a lot of sounds between the 3 of these, and so it's all part of Reason 10. So that's pretty cool right there. So I'm going to leave those open because they're part of the Reason 10. Everything else is getting closed up. And then over here we have chords. We have a couple of chords. We have the first instance of Europa here. Oh. But yeah, this is a preset here. I always find that, especially with new synthesizers, if you're not familiar with them, I do recommend kind of starting with presets, getting in the ballpark, and then altering the presets to get just the sound you're looking for. So yeah, nice. We got another grain here. We got the first of 4 grains, I believe. A patch called Noxious. And then we have some plucks down here. There's the radical piano right there. And then look, I even got synchronous in there. Isn't that something? I got synchronous in there. And I believe that's feeding into the I think that's feeding into the CV in Europa here, I think. Yeah, we got that. We got the synchronous feeding into the CV in Europa there, and then it's modulating some stuff in Europa there, and then we have some audio tracks, and then a couple more grains down here.
You hear that bass player?
And we just have a couple of samples in here, and they're just on one shots. But the thing is, you can use this as a one-shot sampler, and then you can, of course, really affect.
You hear that bass player? You hear that? You hear that bass player? You hear that bass player?
Yeah, these grain synths are unbelievable. They're very, very cool. So I left open the things that you get with Reason 10. You have your Clang, your Pangea, your Humana. You get your Europa, your grain, your radical piano. I guess we can close this guy. And your synchronous. Also, just real quick here, the send effects. Send effects are very, very nice the way they're set up here in Reason 10 or all the previous versions of Reason. yeah, just got my two reverbs, saturator. I have a reverse delay and then a normal DDDL. I'm glad they didn't get rid of these half rack. These things are really handy just for utilities. Just to... So yeah, that's kind of my sends there. And then on the back here, we have kind of a mess with the side chain. Normally, what I do is I'll have a side chain bus, but this time around I didn't do a side chain bus. I went ahead and just did a bunch of spider audio mergers and basically routed it to every single channel, which is a little sloppy, but it's I was kind of halfway done with the process, and then I realized I thought I was just going to sidechain a few things. It turned out I was just going to sidechain everything, where normally what I recommend with that is to actually create basically a sidechain bus. Then you just route all these mix channels that are manually wired up. See how they're manually wired up to this spider, and then that's really messy and that's a little disorganized, but it just happens to be the way I did it with this particular song. I kind of described this song as something I just kind of really threw together. I only had a couple hours really to work on it, but yeah, that's pretty much what we got. The front of the rack there. We got our send effects. I love this compressor, great compressor. Yeah, stay tuned because I'm actually going to do some rack extension reviews, and this is one of the compressors. It's a really, really old compressor. I mean, it looks old, but it's literally old. I mean, it's been in the rack extension shop forever. This happens to be my favorite EQ as well by Casa. They make some really, really cool EQs. But yeah, that's the sequencer. That's the rack. Keep it organized. Here's a mixer again. I got everything kind of color coded. Got my main Vox on the far right. Always main Vox buses are on the far right. We got the drums and the bass right here, and then it just kind of goes out. You can see all these orange LEDs. If you have an orange LED on, that means that particular... This is a really good way to tell if you have set up your... Like, once you route your side chains, you got to go in here and you got to, of course, get the dynamics just right, which I actually recommend side chaining each instrument separate. Just because some variations, might give it a little bit more of a punch, whatnot. You might want to side chain the hell out of your bass, and maybe not side chain the pad as much, or vice versa. And some things you might not want to side chain at all. But I actually was attempting to do some gain staging up here, which I kind of again ran out of time. I kind of just, got this thing to sound good enough. I'm calling it done. I mean, the thing is I got to wake up early and leave town tomorrow, and I was working, had to work late last night and working all week. So as soon as I heard about this challenge, I got pretty excited, but I was like, how? I got to find time to work on this thing. So luckily I got in here and got a few things done. But another thing is gain staging, which I'll talk about that in a future tutorial, so please subscribe, and we'll talk about gain staging. But I did some real quick gain staging here, and then of course my dynamics, I had that set up for my my side chaining, and then my EQs. I pretty much low pass everything. I recommend low pass filtering every single thing in your rack. Even if it's an instrument, a high-end instrument, there still could be some low end down there messing with you. You don't want too much fuzz in the low end and make it muddy. Another thing, it's like a quick tip, is let's say you want to work on this EQ here in the mellow bells here. What'll happen is you open up your spectrum, and you'll get down here, you'll be looking at your spectrum, and you'll be turning these knobs, and I don't know if it's just me, but I tend to kind of like I'll float away, and the next thing you know, it'll like change. It'll be, whoa, what the heck? And I'm adjusting the channel next to it. I don't know if this happens to anybody else, but it happens to me quite a bit. A good way, is a little trick I found, is when you take your spectrum and you put it right next to the channel, like right against the channel you're adjusting. Like for this, like if I want to adjust this channel, put your spectrum window right up against there. And then that way, you can see where you're at. That's just a stupid little, silly little tip. The SSL mixer is so tiny with these little knobs, and when you're doing a lot of mixing and you're doing it quick, you may find yourself kind of floating off the channel, and I don't know, I do it all the time and I get super frustrated, but this is a quick trick that I figured out. Let's say I want to adjust this EQ right here, I just put that, bam, put it right next to it, and now I've got that against the right side. I know that this is the channel I'm working on. So It's just a quick little tip that I thought I'd pass on. It's really helped me a lot anyway, because I drift all over the place on these EQs because they're so tiny. Inserts, no inserts, no inserts whatsoever. Oh, I have a couple of inserts bypassed, I guess. Inserts are one of those things. They're super handy and they're really very powerful. I just don't really use them. Send effects, on the other hand, the send effects setup in Propellerhead Reason is unbelievable. It's astonishingly good. I love it. What's so great about the workflow setup in Propellerhead Reason is what's nice is, you can work everything. You can kind of set it up really, really well. So example, this is my pluck, okay? Here's my rack extension right here. Here's all my controls. Here's my MIDI data, right? That's my MIDI data, which I kind of screwed up. Control Z, Control Z. But I got my MIDI data, right? Okay, I got my rack extension, all my knobs right there. I got my spectrum analyzer, and I have my send and return track, or my EQ, let's say, okay? This workflow is nice. The fact that you can kind of like, let's say you're really, really zeroing in on a particular track, getting a particular sound, you can have your MIDI notes, your rack extension, a spectrum, and your EQ settings right there, and just kind of like the workflow of this nice little loop here. I mean, I do fuss a little bit about Reason's workflow. I admit that I do fuss and bitch about Reason's workflow sometimes, but there's something when you're really, really in a track and you can find a really beautiful flow with Propellerhead Reason. It just really makes it easy to work kind of in tandem with separate channels and whatnot. And of course, what I always recommend is closing down the parts of the mixer you're not using. That makes it a lot easier. So anyway, that's the send and return. We have all film score. We have a TSR1. We have saturation, reverse DDL, and delay default. That's actually the reverse delay, which is kind of fun. That's pretty much it. I feel like I've babbled long enough. Let's just go ahead and hit play on this track. Hopefully the fine folks over at Propellerhead will like it. Just a great piece of software. I know I had a couple of videos the last couple of weeks. I wanted more UI changes with Reason 10, but having this little project in Reason 10 and having me just kind of have a due date has made me kind of push in Reason here for a couple of hours, and using the software and the amount of sounds in the software. And I know I fuss about the workflow, but I mean, it is a good software. It's probably my favorite DAW. It just really is. I love producing music in it. It makes producing music very, very pleasurable, very enjoyable. And once you get in here and get a rhythm and get like some momentum going and you get some inspiration, there's no better software out there. So it's been a real pleasure working here in Reason 10. So here's my song with no further ado. Enough jibber jabber. Let's just go ahead and play the song. So hopefully you enjoy it. And yeah, let me know what you think of the song. Good feedback, bad feedback. These little videos, they aren't for beginners. They aren't for experts. They're for everybody. Hopefully you enjoy the song. And like I say, subscribe, give a thumbs up, leave a comment, and we'll see you guys next week.